Thanks for joining me today. As you can see, I got started before you with a few pastel pencils that I'll have listed in the PDF that's linked to this video. So now I'm using 305 Spruce Blue to make those nostrils darker, followed by some 229 Black. And I've speeded the video up so you wouldn't have to spend all afternoon watching me. So I'm continuing to refine the horse using different NuPastels, that's a red violet, and pastel pencils. I find myself using them more and more, adding little touches of pink and dark brown here and there to bring up the value on our horse before we add the lights. We have to go darker before we can go lighter. So I'm just continuing to work on those nostrils to get them colored just as vividly as I can. I like using the blue pastel pencils to just change the color just a little bit on those edges. I like to take opportunity to use color wherever I can. That's a dark gray NuPastel. I believe that is a cordovan, a 353, which is a lovely Mars violet color, which I like to use in horses quite a bit. So I'm just going to let you watch. Be sure and leave your comments underneath the video. Let me know what you like or you don't like, and give me suggestions for what you'd like to see. Now that's a 211 white, so I'm starting to add just a little bit more dimension by adding the lights to the nostrils and muzzle of the horse, adding a little more pink. We want to build up all our darks before we add our lights, because our lights are not going to show up if we're not dark enough. Continuing to add a little more black. I tend to go back and forth between the colors. It's better to go slowly to build things up than to take a giant leap and find out you put too much pastel on your paper, because the paper only holds so much. That's a 681 light flesh tint Carb Othello pencil. The Carb Othello pencils work very nicely on the velour paper. This is a 770 Payne's Gray, which just has kind of a purpley cast to it, which adds that hint of color, which is so much better than just using black. So now I'm starting to add more darks to build up the darker values in this white horse. I think it's such a challenge to paint white animals. We can add so much color to them. And Payne's Gray has that just slight hint of purple to it that makes it dark but not a dead black, gives it lots of color. That is, well, that's blue, but before that was 640 Caput Mortem Violet. This is the Cretacolor Black Lead pencil, which is also listed in your supply list. Now I'm using a medium value of gray NuPastel to start to build that up. That's 305 Spruce Blue, and that is black. When you add the spruce blue underneath the black, it just makes it richer. I hope you'll try this project at home. And we're adding some pink on the lighter side, right side of the horse's face. It kind of glows there, so we want to intensify that glow. I like to push it into the nap of the paper with my finger. Just continuing to build those darks very gradually. So far we've just used NuPastels, which are harder pastels, to work on our horse. I believe you really could paint a whole painting with NuPastels, but we want to add some richer, softer pastels as we go along. So now I'm starting to define the dark areas in the mane of the horse. I've mapped them out. Now this is an area that really glows in the reference photo, so I'm adding some, now I'm adding some Rembrandts. This is a Rembrandt blue. I used a golden ochre in that gold part of the mane. Now we're adding some grays and darker gray. These are blue gray, Rembrandt blue grays. It's getting pretty dark now. This is kind of the scary, ugly stage where you're not sure it's going to work out, but trust me, it will. So don't be afraid to add color. Continuing to define the eye. At this point, I'm not really sure about the shape of the eyes or the positioning. You'll see later on that I actually changed them. I'm adding 727.3 dark blue-gray in those shadows on the forehead. Now we're outlining the ears. I'm going to add a light tone of gray, that's 727.7, which is my base color, which I kind of add all over my painting. The medium gray NuPastel. This is 727.3. This is a Caput Mortem Carb Othello. This is a dark gray NuPastel, 259. Darkening those areas even further. It's a little bit darker than the 727.3. Now I have to be careful in that gold area. I don't want it to get muddy. So now I've switched to 353 brown to add a warmish tint to that area because I want to keep it warm. It's a nice area that glows where the light comes through in the mane. So we want to keep it that way. We don't want to get too dark. That's 231.5 that I added there. That's gold ochre. And that's 305 spruce blue. So we're building darks. It's looking pretty scary right now. That's 353. That's 263, which is Indian red, which is a nice warm red. So that's really warming up that area. It looks pretty good. $263 again. And that is my black 229. Decided to add some gray to that area. 305 spruce blue. I know it's kind of going fast, but if I'd have let it play at regular speed, you'd be here all day. So that's my light gray color. I'm just filling things in with that. And just continuing to build up those darks. Now I've added some purple there and I don't like it, so I tried to rub it out, didn't work, so now I'm using my blower to blow it off. That helped some, and that looks a little better. There was just too much purple there. So now we're going to add in some background before we continue. That's going to have a black background, so I'm putting a pretty powerful blue underneath it to create a more interesting black. It'll go underneath the black, but it will also add depth to the black, so the black won't be dead. Just black by itself would be a just dead black hole. Now this is a Giraud 526 black, which is harder than the Rembrandt black and very rich, and I like to add that about an inch from the body of the animal, and it just pushes in that strong Rembrandt blue. So we're going to add that background just a little ways out from our horse before we add our lights to the horse. We don't want to do the whole background yet because you would just drag your hand through it. So I'm just adding it around the body of the horse, in between some mane areas. Adding a little more black back to the ear. I'm going to add some blue over the mane there. Still trying to figure out where the mane's going to go exactly, so adding a little more black here and there. This is dark gray. It's always better to gradually build up the darks than just add a bunch all at once and decide that's not where you want them. So I think about what I'm doing before I do it. Still adding the darks. Now I'm adding a little white edge around the nostril. A little more brown, a little more purple, red, violet. Okay, now I have these are the colors I'm going to use for the lights, and I've slowed things down a bit to regular time so you can see what I'm doing. I'm using a white, a light gray, a cream, a pink, and a blue. And I'm using the edge of my pastel. These are very sharp edges. When you sharpen your pastel by holding it horizontal to the sanding block, vertically to the sanding block, you get 4 nice sharp edges. And those sharp edges will draw those fine lines in the mane. I have a video on YouTube that shows how I sharpen my sticks. So just look it up and it'll show you how I do it on my sandpaper block. So I'm using pink and blue and light gray. I'm also using a little 304 orchid. I think I decided not to use very much of that. But here we go with the whites and the 299 gray. Now we're starting to shape that mane. This is really the fun part. This is where we put the icing on the cake, so to speak. I'm putting the hairs inside the ear with 299 gray. I've got the gray in my holder. You can get those holders online at Jerry's. I had a broken piece, so I stuck it in the holder to hold it. They help a lot for that. And when I paint, I keep 2 or 3 whites sharp all the time so I don't have to spend time sharpening them. If I have an area I want to be bright white, I just rub it back and forth on the edge. As you can see, I'm doing that, so I end up with a greater area of white, so it's nice and bright. Just use a long curving motion, nice even stroke to pull out those beautiful hairs. You're the artist, so you can decide where they go. It's my white, it's broken, so it was slipping out of the paper. So I can pull that mane right over the eye. This is a 276 buff, which adds warmer hairs. You can see it's much warmer. It's very pretty. The dark gray area there you see in the middle is really the shadow of the mane, so I'm pulling the white hairs over that, or right next to that shadow that is created by that hair. Now I'm using a gray 726 Carb Othello to add the shadows for some of the white hairs that I pulled over the right side of the face. It just makes it look more realistic. And you can see it's coming out of the paper. I'm going to have to stick it in a holder. Now I'm adding the bright white hairs that shape, they're on the front of the face. They're little short hairs. You want to make sure when you're adding these hairs that you follow the direction and curve of the face. I'm adding them up the center now. And since these hairs aren't as sharp and distinct as the hairs, the fine lines on the mane, I'm letting the edge of my pastel get dull, adding a little highlight over the eye where the light catches it. So they're not little teeny sharp hairs, it's just a general area of white. It's really looking nice now. It's coming together. Now I'm using my white charcoal pencil to add some stray hairs. And I give you a little secret with this. You hold it on the side and you twist it as you go, and it makes those fine little hairs. We want to put a few in different places. We don't want to put them all over. So now I'm back to my gray NuPastel, sharp edges, adding more hairs to the mane. This is the 247 or 276 buff that adds golden colors in that area that catches the light. By using different colors, we can get a wide variation and variety in this mane. And now a little bit of pink, 286 madder pink, pink madder. It's a nice color. It's good for the muzzle. It's good for the hair. It's a wonderful color. And 235 blue over that. Get a little lavender tone. And checking the edges. Always checking the edges. I want to make sure they're nice and sharp. You can, I use the edge to draw the hairs, but you can also draw things out with the point of the edge if you want to. Sometimes you need to do that. Mostly though I use the side edge, and when it gets dull I rotate the stick to the next sharp edge. Then when I've used all four, I sharpen. This is the white NuPastel. You can see how crisp and bright it is next to the gray. Now I'm drawing with the edge to get that hair just the way I want it. Drawing with the point rather, excuse me. Now I didn't get as sharp as I wanted, so I'm going back over with the point, the sharpened point of my NuPastel to kind of finish that up. Adding a little gray to add a little shadow that I felt was necessary. A little darker gray. Using the point to draw the hairs in the ear. This is a Gypsy White Horse. I don't think I mentioned that. They have the most luscious manes and tails. They continue to grow throughout their lives. I love to paint them. Now I'm using a piece of black construction paper to protect my painting and to rest my hand on. Looks like that's going just out of camera shot. Now I'm going to switch my picture around, which is okay to do. Please make your painting more comfortable for your hand. So I turned it on its side. I'm adding more background, and I hope it didn't make you dizzy when I did that. And I'm going to add more black on top of that so I can draw in more hair. Now I'm going to add some more hair after I finished adding that background. I'm going to use light gray, $2.99. White, $2.11, you see that there, and the blue, $2.35. So we're continuing to work on that mane. I hope you guys are not bored with this real-time presentation. I didn't want to speed it up too much. I wanted you to see exactly what I do and how I do it. So you can see I'm making that bright white by going over and over and over it. We don't want everything to be just the same. I do not want this horse to look like it's wearing a mop on top of his head. Now that you have the idea of how this is done, I'm going to speed things up a little bit and get the rest of this mane in for you. So I'm continuing to use the same colors, $2.99 gray, $2.11 white, $2.35 blue, and $2.86 pink madder as we're zipping along to completing our horse. These colors and this method would work for any kind of white animal. Maybe you have a dog that's white. You could do it the same way. I like to vary the colors for drama. You could add purples instead of blues. Just let your imagination run wild. I would suggest you use a color wheel to use warm colors in the light struck areas for your undercoats and cool colors in the shadow areas. This is just a really pretty area. This horse has such presence. He's just very regal. I'm using my pencil to add those fine hairs. Using the pencil is something you want to do occasionally, a few. You don't want too many. It spoils the effect. Whoops, flipped back over. Now I'm back to adding a few hairs with my little pencil. Now I want to apologize. I forgot to turn my camera on, so you can see I've done a lot while you were away. I added the shadows underneath the mane that lie on the body of the horse with a medium gray. And now I'm beginning to finish up the coat of the horse. I also added more background down the right side and the left side off the back. Now underneath the shadow areas of the mane, I used my white NuPastel to make it really white so that the shadows stood out and so that you could tell those were shadows and not mane hairs. They're not quite as crisp as the hairs of the mane. I blurred them together a little bit. So now I'm just finishing up the body of the horse. I'm using some browns where just as it turns from the light into the shadow, I wanted to warm it up a little bit. This has been such a fun project and a beautiful horse. Now I'm using some white to add the white hairs of the coat. I'm just adding a few and being very indistinct with that because I don't want it to draw attention to itself. The mane is really the star of this show, so we don't want to use a lot of bright white hairs. We want them to be indistinct, but we also want to let our viewers see that we are adding hairs to the coat. I'm finishing the background here. I added the blue. Now I'm going over it, this time with a Rembrandt black, 700.5. I'm using the Rembrandt to fill in the background. We use the Giraud up close to the horse, and now we're using the Rembrandt. I'm using the white to add a few mane hairs out. Now I'm finishing up the eyes. I'm refining things, changing things, adding details, a little white in the eye with a pencil. This is the time to make those finishing touches. Thank you for joining me today as I painted a white horse. I hope you'll try this at home. I've included a PDF that you can download by clicking the link below of all the colors that I used for this presentation. I hope you'll click the subscribe button and give me a thumbs up if you like the video. And if you hit the little bell, you'll be notified as soon as I put a new video online. Thank you and happy painting.